We are moving on to week 4 already of the NFL season. Here are some sneaky ads to pluck from the waiver wire this week as you look to improve your teams. As always, Jeff Erickson will start with the quarterback position. I know we both want to talk about the same guy. I'll let you go first on Geno Smith.
I like Geno Smith this week. 2 out of his 3 games have been decent. Joe Bartle was writing that up in our waiver article that you can read on RotoWire. Use promo code YouTube15 to check that all out. But the one game he looked horrible in primetime that everybody saw against the Chargers. Yeah, but the Chargers are a really good defense. They have a tendency to make everybody look pretty bad. He gets the Chicago Bears this week, and the Bears, they came out okay. They got the 3 interceptions against Dallas, but Jalen Johnson's out for most of the season, if not all of it, there with that groin injury that put him on IR. I think their secondary is attackable. It's in Vegas. I think this is one of those games that could be sneakily a shootout situation here because the Raiders, I think, are also going to give up their share of yards and points in this one here. I think Geno will have to throw the ball a lot. I think he's a decent ad. If you have Joe Burrow and you picked up Jake Browning, I'd use Geno instead this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's the QB 11 on the year, despite that 6 fantasy point game in week 2. And I think the worse the Raiders run offense is, which has been the worst in the NFL so far this season. They cannot run the ball. They're dead last in total rushing EPA. They're last in EPA per rush. The worse that is for the Raiders in real life, the better that is for Geno Smith in fantasy. There's going to be a lot of games where they're either trailing and throwing their way back into it, or they're going back and forth. I don't think that's really going to change as the season goes along, and generated a pretty nice connection with Trey Tucker this past week, by the way, giving them kind of a secondary weapon alongside Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. I have Sam Darnold on my list as well, still widely available in a lot of leagues. Seattle gets the Cardinals this week. They played a fairly easy schedule, some low-scoring games, has that Cardinals team. They face Mac Jones, Spencer Rattler, and Bryce Young so far. I think this will be their toughest test. Still middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position. So I look at this as a pretty good spot for Sam Darnold, who's put up 18 and 17 fantasy points in his last 2 games after that rough week 1. And I will mention, Jeff, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be back this week. If he's not, give me Marcus Mariota again. Currently the QB5 on the week heading into Monday Night Football. Commanders were just fine without Jaden Daniels in week 3. So if they think they can get by another week without him, if we get another Mariota start, he's somebody I would look to grab. And then what do you think about Jackson Dart? We've kind of seen the good and the bad so far from Russell Wilson. It's been mostly bad, but of course we'll always have week 2 against Dallas. It's coming at some point, right?
Oh, that's that goal line sequence last night against the Chiefs. I think that accelerated the timeline a little bit there. They're already putting Dart in some run packages. Yep. They haven't let him throw, but it's coming. It's coming probably pretty soon because to be a run pass option, you actually have to pass every once in a while. So I think that will happen. The Giants are 0-3 now. They have another tough game this week. Maybe Dart gets that game against the Saints. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe the Giants have to start 1-5, but it's coming at some point soon.
Yeah, he's somebody I want, probably not in a standard 12-teamer, but if you're in a 2-quarterback league, if you're in Superflex, if you're in Dynasty, of course, certainly keep an eye on Jackson Dart. I think sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks, if not maybe as soon as week 4, that's going to be happening. Where do you want to start at running back?
Okay, it's sneaky ads, but I'm going to do Captain Obvious ad first. Unfortunately, James Conner out for the season.
Yep.
It's Trey Benson time. If you want to get his backup, Amari DiMarcado, still hanging out on the roster there. So if you're in a mega deep league, he'll probably be a pickup as well because Benson's already rostered. But 52% roster in Yahoo as of Tuesday morning. So in those 48% leagues, go grab him. It's an unload the wallet situation here. We've been waiting for him to be ascendant. This is his time.
Yeah, similar ownership in ESPN leagues. So, you might think, oh, he's not going to be out there. I mean, it's almost a 50-50 proposition. So make sure you at least double check for him. I think we got to talk about Washington, right? We wondered going into week 3, what is this going to look like? You remove Austin Eckler from this offense. Well, we saw Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt play 23 snaps. He had 8 carries, 1 target. Once again, was not on the field for the first 2 series of the game. That's been the case for all 3 weeks so far. Chris Rodriguez, 22 snaps, 11 carries, was not targeted. Jeremy McNichols, 15 snaps, 4 carries, was not targeted. This is kind of the worst case scenario that we thought might be coming, Jeff, where it looks like this is going to be like a 2.5 back system. Maybe they use all 3, like they did this past week. Although, I think GameScript made that a little bit easier pulling away from the Raiders. I think I'm most interested in Chris Rodriguez. He was getting the early down work. Once again, did not see Krosky-Merritt until later in the game. I don't know why that is. He ended up mostly splitting that early down work with Krosky-Merritt as the game went along. They ended up splitting goal line work. McNichols, of course, comes in as the long touchdown run. Great run, by the way, late in the game. he was more the third down back. So I think he might be the guy that you look at and say, oh, explosive run in week 3. He's a guy I got to grab. That's a little bit more smoke and mirrors to me. I would rather target Rodriguez.
Yeah, and the problem is I don't want to start any of these guys. That's the real problem. It's just like you're going to try to time the market any given week to see who's the guy that scores, basically, and that's not anybody's idea of fun. Maybe once we get into bye weeks, that'll change a little bit there, and we'll change our mind on that. 5 different carriers for Commanders. Debo had 3 carries. Mariota ran the ball a bunch. We mentioned that earlier too. We got to mention the Giants. Tyrone Tracy's got a shoulder injury. It was already Cam Scatterbo time. Now he's going to be the main guy on that, and Devin Singletary will be the backup. In LA, we got Najee Harris out with the non-contact injury. Hassan Haskins will probably be the backup. I know you have a little bit of pining in your heart for another back with the Chargers, but I don't think that's happening yet. So there's a couple other guys, but then I got 3 more for you real quick.
Okay.
Ollie Gordon, early game work for Miami. They want to get him involved between the tackles a little bit more. He looked good while doing it against Buffalo for Miami. Blake Corum getting early work for the Rams and looking really good. And meanwhile, Kyron kind of struggling at the goal line too. Yep. So maybe that may be a situation there where we might see more Corum going forward. And finally, Woody Marks, clearly now the number 2 in Houston. And Nick Chubb didn't look great. You saw a lot of that game. You can tell me more, but I think Marks will continue to get more work.
Yeah, and that was the case even within that game against Jacksonville in week 3. I mean, Woody Marks was on the field for 21 of the final 35 snaps for the Houston Texans, who I think are just in full-on evaluation mode right now for like everyone other than CJ Stroud and Nico Collins in that offense, right? I think they need to find answers very, very quickly. And if they feel like they need to get a little bit more playmaking on the field, I think we could continue to see more of Woody Marks. Glad you mentioned Blake Corum. Nice change of pace option for Kyron Williams. I think Kyron's still, of course, going to be the guy as long as he's healthy, but we did not see Blake Corum mixing in like this early last season or really at any point last season. Over 7 yards per carry thus far. Of course, had that touchdown against Tennessee in week 2. A couple other names that I'll give you here. And Kyle Monungai in Chicago, I'm not super excited about him, but I think we at least have the clear handcuff now to DeAndre Swift. We did see a slightly lower snap share for Swift. He was banged up coming in. It turned into a blowout, so maybe that was part of it. But Monungai is now the clear number 2 guy. Roshan Johnson was active on Sunday, did not even see the field. So again, Monungai, not necessarily somebody you need to roster right now, but in the event that DeAndre Swift misses time, I think he'd be the clear guy to step in. And then keep an eye on Tajay Spears. I know everybody wants to get their hands on the Tennessee Titans right now. The fantasy gold mine, that is Tennessee, but he's on IR. He only has to miss 1 more game. Sounds like he'll likely be back for week 5. Again, it's the Titans. They're a bottom 5 rushing attack, but they need to figure out ways to move the ball. We heard a ton of Tajay Spears hype coming into the season. They were telling us they want this to be a 50-50 split between he and Tony Pollard. We'll see. We'll see if that actually happens, but this is a guy who has 82 catches over the last 2 seasons, despite basically missing half of last year.
Yeah, exactly. So all along in training camp, they're talking about a split. So I think, and Tony Pollard has never been proven to be a guy that can be a workhorse back either. He's typically gotten hurt. Maybe Tennessee improves its efficiency offensively, but that new and improved offensive line hasn't been the case. J.C. Latham getting hurt at right tackle is a big part of that there. How about wide receiver? What do you got there?
I think we got to mention Torrey Horton for the Seattle Seahawks, right? I mean, the snap share, it's not necessarily what you want, but it's been consistent through these first 3 games, which have all followed, very different scripts. Of course, just a lopsided blowout from the jump on Sunday against New Orleans. Did see a lot of backups later in that game, but he's caught touchdowns in each of the last 2 games. He has 9 targets in that span. Also had a return touchdown on Sunday. I think we're just going to continue to see more of him. Like, he's a guy that we've heard some buzz about dating back to training camp. I mean, no debate now. He's the wide receiver 3. Could he eventually push Cooper Kupp for some more snaps as the season goes along? We'll see. Either way, I think it's clear that he's built some trust with this coaching staff and with Sam Darnold. So he's the guy who came to mind first. I think we have to look at Jalen Tolbert as well. We did just get some news on CeeDee Lamb. He's going to avoid IR, which is good, but Cowboys still expecting him to miss at least 2 weeks. They're going to have to throw the ball a ton, I think, to keep up with the Green Bay Packers in a revenge spot, or more of a avenging a loss spot, I should say, for Green Bay. And then you get the Jets in week 5. So I think these are 2 potential shootout type of spots for this Dallas offense. 65 snaps, 42 routes, 6 targets for Jalen Tolbert last week. And perhaps most importantly, Jeff, we saw him really step into the CeeDee Lamb role. CeeDee Lamb, gets hurt early in that game, and we saw Tolbert operating as that Z receiver for most of the day against Chicago.
Yeah, certainly not the same dynamic play, but maybe a better end zone target though than Lamb is. Lamb has never been one to command a ton of end zone targets. So yeah, I had Tolbert on my list. Tyquan Thornton's on my list.
Yep.
Someone that has never been. I don't think he's like a target hog, but clearly he can get open and get open deep. That is something the other Chiefs receivers as currently constituted cannot do. Juju gets open sometimes underneath. Hollywood Brown is getting pushed around a lot of times, but he can get open at times, but not deep. I think they're going to continue to take shots with Thornton. I had Sterling Shepard on my list because I'm anticipating Mike Evans not playing this week. A big showdown against the Eagles, 2-3-0 teams, and that one there should be fun. And what are we doing about Trey Tucker? Now, we've avoided it all the way into like the 10-minute mark of this video here. So let's talk Trey Tucker. 3 touchdowns, 8 catches, 145 yards. Admittedly, some garbage time production and the big loss to the Commanders. Is there a significance here? Does this matter? Is he a guy now that we can maybe think about rostering for bye weeks?
I think so, right? I mean, 41 fantasy points is enough of a splash game that you at least have to pay attention. 9 targets on 33 routes, of course, the 3 touchdowns, accounting for basically half of those fantasy points. We know we're not going to see that on a week-to-week basis. We probably won't see anything close to that the rest of the year, but it goes hand in hand with what we talked about with Geno Smith, right? If we don't trust the Raiders running game, if we think the Raiders defense isn't all that good, and we think that they're going to be a team that's throwing the ball 35 to 45 times a week because they have to stay in games, those targets are going to trickle down beyond Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers. So I'm at least paying attention to Trey Tucker, and a solid matchup against the Bears coming up for the Raiders. They get the Colts and the Titans after that. So obviously not sustainable what we saw this week, but I think you have to pay attention there. I also have Luther Burden on my list, Jeff. He played only 17 snaps, but drew 3 targets, did have a carry as well. He had the long touchdown on the flea flicker. I think a lot of that was just the Dallas defense playing maybe the worst defensive game that we've seen so far this year. So we still need to get the snaps up for Luther Burden to be somebody that we trust. And, I will throw out as well, just check for Romeo Doubs. He's not a sneaky ad, but he's still pretty widely available. I mean, we're talking available in almost 70% of ESPN leagues. I know he only had 2 targets. Weird game for the Packers offense against that great Browns defense, but every single week he's leading the Packers in snaps. He's leading them in routes. So I think that opportunity will still be there for Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's just the problem is timing the Packers properly, but they get Dallas Sunday night game. And we know Dallas is a pass funnel. We want to have our wide receivers go against Dallas. So I was encouraged by the way that they targeted Matthew Golden a little bit more. About the only thing I was encouraged by the Packers offense on Sunday. Admittedly, tougher matchup against the Browns. Tight end, pretty thin. Little Brenton Strange if he's available. I know he's like 25% rostered in Yahoo League, something around that area. If you need one, I think he's all right.
Yeah, coming off of his best game of the year, it didn't really feel like he made that big of an impact against Houston, but 6 for 61. He's drawn 16 targets through these first 3 games, and most importantly, just commanding all the snaps for these Jags tight ends. And there aren't that many situations where you have that. So Brenton Strange still close to 80% available right now in ESPN leagues. I will once again, I think for now, the 4th week in a row, bring up Isaiah Likely. Did not play in week 3. Should have a good chance, you would think, to get back for week 4 against KC. Could be a little bit of a ramp-up period, but I do think they want to get him involved, a team that's plenty comfortable playing 2 tight end sets. Of course, had that huge week 1 against Kansas City last season. So somebody on the radar. And then I know you and I are both at least somewhat mildly intrigued by Mason Taylor.
Yeah. Snap share is there. Opportunity is there because let's face it, the pass catchers on the Jets outside of Garrett Wilson are terrible. Someone's got to step up into the void, and Mason Taylor could be that guy. So there you go. Sure, that's the case.
Yeah, he had 5 targets last week from Tyrod Taylor. So an improvement at least over these first couple of weeks, but more of a deep league guy. And then the last guy I'll mention here, he's really done nothing so far, but Cole Kmet continues to play the vast majority of the snaps for the Chicago Bears. Caleb's not really looking his way, but Colston Loveland did get hurt earlier this last week against Dallas. So, any thought of him being more involved, maybe we shelve that for now. So if you're just trying to follow, some usage patterns, Cole Kmet could make some sense. Not somebody I have a ton of confidence in right now. The tight end boom is kind of dried up already, Jeff. But that will do it for our sneaky ads looking ahead to week 4. Use that code YouTube15. Put it in over at RotoWire.com. YouTube15, 15% off everything we offer over at RotoWire.